Okay, so I'm going to be reviewing a friend of mine's short novella today. It's called The Demon That Drives the Monster. So here goes. Let's take a look at the first chapter. I am the demon that drives the monster. The metallic sword glistens under the intense sun as they clash over a dusty training ground. I am the demon that drives the monster. The clashing sword rings, sweat drips to the dirt. Onto drips onto the dirt, turning it to mud. Using stuff like, so this is an action scene, so I would not keep I would not have these long sentences in action scenes. So keep the sentences short for action. So in this case, the choice I would make, turning it to mud, period. Mud that. Or mud that is quickly displaced by the shuffling horse speed. Something like that. Because you already have this really good rhythm building up in the beginning, so you don't want to lose that pace, which I think you're kind of building up really well. The demon drives monster as the dust settles from the recent scuffle. It sounds like it. Dusk falls, comma, closing the chapter on these young men's lives. For tomorrow represents a day significant and crucial. That's a bit of an archaic way to say it, but it works. I know that's kind of the tone you're going for. So, and I do kind of like the more like old schooly tone. So, definitely keep that if you like it. But yeah, just be aware that that's definitely like a different type of tone. For tomorrow represents a day significant and crucial. The crux of their future. The crux of their future depends on tomorrow. I would watch out for tomorrow back to back. Closing the chapter on these things. Maybe like the mooring. Maybe add different. All right, different word choice maybe. In this culture that revolves around the warrior, in a land that prides itself on its army, tomorrow is the test. So I know you are going for a specific style here, but exposition like this sometimes is a bit easier to grok if it's a little bit more just kind of in the flow of the scene. So these two guys fighting. Maybe they're even talking about what's happening tomorrow. That can kind of give me like the sense like, hey, look, like these guys actually, um, you know, like can give me the same information, but I can also learn about the characters at the same time by bringing it more into a scene. Like, hey, like he like stopped his sword and he's like, I'm gonna kill you tomorrow. Like, be ready or whatever it is. That may be able to kind of communicate that same information, the importance that tomorrow is coming up, what that means for these warriors, but then also kind of doing it in a way that's a little bit more active. Like there's something happening, they're fighting already, they're practicing for tomorrow, and they also talk about kind of the weight, the stakes that are on tomorrow. So, since they could walk, these boys. Since they could walk, these boys ran. Nice, I like that. Good phrase. Since they could speak, these boys shouted. Since they could reach, they grabbed a sword. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't really see like the two boys. Like, I don't even know if it's boys fighting up here. I would really kind of step back because I love these punchy images, but I don't really know that these boys are people in the scene. So like bringing this really in will like into a scene will help a lot because I think you start really strong with the scene. There's this action going on. Dust falls. And then maybe it's like the two boys put down their sword and says, like, one of them says, I'll kill you tomorrow. And like those are kind of, I know that tomorrow is important because it's going to kill him tomorrow. And then I'm also, as a reader, looking forward to it. But and then I also know that there's two boys. I still think you should keep these kind of lines, but maybe have it within kind of the context of like this active scene that's happened. The Legend of the Hyperius Warriors. Cool. And is this like a new chapter? The calm night preceded the chaotic morning. It was as if the stars in the sky shone bright, knowing that for some of these boys it would be the last time they saw their light. I don't know if you intend this to rhyme, but it kind of is. It was a farewell from the heavens. Nice. Good phrasing. I really like your wording. From birth, these soon to be men, we hand selected to become from birth were hand selected to become great warriors. They were then put into a large group and divided. This another like this structure, something that's worth considering bringing into the scene and having the two people arguing, like having conflict to get this information across. Just saying like, hey, instead of like, they were put in large groups, since, they could say like, hey, I knew I was going to kill you in the final battle tomorrow, since we were separating the groups as kids, like, that's probably a like a bad example, but that can probably help really, clarify, you know, this same information, but keeping it really snappy. Because it's a cool backstory, but it's a good amount, so you definitely want to keep the story moving while you're delivering it. On the 10th day of the 10th year, only one of the 16 boys was to become a warrior. They were tested in a tournament to the death. Over 100 years of training was sacrifice, so that one might be deemed worthy. 100 years of sacrifice. I don't know how was that sacrificed. This one was no longer just a boy, nor did he become a man. He, in fact, skipped this whole process and became something more. A legend. Bam. A legend. A god. The lesser must be sacrificed, ensuring only the strongest survive. These sacrificed before stirring the earth with their blood, enriching saturated guard, which they train and vigorous were. Does the blood have some sort of significance? Is it even this test that the story takes place? One thing is like to be aware of is if you mention a lot of these really specific details, like the blood enriching the ground, people are going to expect you to pay them off, like saying, "Oh, well, does it create some power? Or how does it fit into the world?" So to make sure like these cool details you're adding in like actually do tie into the story at some point. It may later on, but that's just my caveat. Just seeing something like that now, where I'm going to be expecting like, oh, how does the blood tie in? Does it have significance? It's on the eve of this test that the story takes place, the eve of judgment. As the last remaining light of day flickered, Tiomanta placed his sword in his sheath. He glanced over to see Trevino slashing in the air, fishing up his last chance to prepare for tomorrow. The loose gravel gave way. So this is the scene I think you're looking for. Is kind of these two boys that like hate each other. I would introduce this earlier. Um, ah, Tasked to beat him in a duel. He lost. For every witty insult he dished, he received a wittier one in return. He hated Trevino. Tiomanta's hatred was only matched by his ambition. Let me see. He not only wanted to be more, he wanted to be the best. This amplified its utmost disdain for Trevino, since he was the only thing currently stopping him from being the best. But this was not enough. Even now, his insatiable desire to be the best would not satisfy him. He wanted it all. Well, great. So the hero has a goal. Good. But what does it all entail? The one thing is, one, it's good you have a goal. Two, though, you do want that goal to be specific. The more broad it is, the harder it is for someone to sympathize or to visualize it and then sympathize with it. So if it's like, hey, I want to be the best, that's harder than saying I want to win the competition for coding that'll make me the best developer in the world. That's much more specific. I know if I won the competition for coding or I lost. It's hard if I'm just want to be the best in general. Best at what? Those are the types of things you kind of want to, once you get a goal in place, to build around it. Not a word was spoken between the two of them as they walked to their respective quarters. Quarters is a very generous word to describe a prison cell where bars allowed them to watch their competition sleep or not sleep that night before killing them. The stench of sweat alone would be enough to keep someone awake. Couple of the fact that they are looking into the eyes of their victims or killers tomorrow. Safe to say, sleep did not come easy to anyone that night, as a million thoughts raced through the minds. As 1,000 raced through their minds. And then you kind of want to put some sort of 1,000 heartbeats. Maybe, I don't know if that's the best punctuation, but whatever. As eternity passes... An eternity passes before dawn, but dawn does eventually come. The first light creeps through a hole in the rock cell these boys call home. It stretches across their faces as if reaching out to them, knowing that destiny awaits them. As our trainer and mentor opens the door, ducking Hami goes to the hull room of his massive frame. Let them out, okay. 4 feet high. But to those firing warriors, it was more. It was a glamour. It was freedom. It was destiny. That's good. I want to see what this means to a specific character. So it's cool you're kind of developing Trevino and how he doesn't like Tiamanta, but I want to also see him personally react to these things. So I think even though I kind of like this Grandoy style, this kind of it's almost reads like the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? It's this very old style of writing, which is cool. But one thing you still want to consider is by bringing it into a character and even in the Iliad, we talked about everything from Achilles' perspective, right? Because he's the one that wants this thing so badly. So I don't, I want to see what the character Trevino thinks about all this. So yeah, I would have him say, hey, what is glamour, what is freedom, what does destiny look like? As opposed to kind of I think the narrator saying it in encapsulating it's good, but I think that I would almost be looking for something more, just around him, because he's the person we're kind of sympathizing with throughout this process. But what does that... So it's if I just, it's kind of like this, if it's just a thing that's happening, if it's this glamour, this fame thing, you're a spectator, right? But if it's you get to know Trevino and then you get to know why it's so important to him, and it's his one shot to make his life meaningful or whatever it is, then you become a participant with him, and it becomes a little bit more of a connection, I think. But again, it's up to you guys, up to you. They were then shoved out into the jeering mob, bloodthirsty villagers, warriors, and politicians who claimed to observe it, but truly loved the gruesomeness. That's good. And they had to wait there, 2 seconds ahead, laughs and cries. Finally, after another eternity passed, it was their turn. I'm going to zoom in a little bit too, just in case it's hard to see. I'll zoom out just a little bit. There we go. They were shoved out into the jeering mob, the bloodthirsty villagers, warriors. Finally, after an eternity passed, it was their turn. Team Monta was the first one up. He faced an opponent that they knew to be slow. Trembling fingers indicated nervousness as opponent, a good omen. Great. I love, like, so when you do get into a scene, it's really good. Like, they're really well developed. You kind of capture the moments really well. I mean, I would almost play to that more because, I think your tone is already pretty well communicated. We kind of get this grandiose feel, but the nice thing about getting into a scene is it makes your reader connect with characters really fast and really get to know these people really well. So then you get kind of more bang for your buck, and you get kind of more out of like your writing style when you're not only kind of getting this world and this tone across, but also, really, punching home with like, people getting to know and care about these characters. They were released into the pit. The gravel was now, as they were released into the pit, the gravel was now mud from the blood. It's kind of passive voice, oddly phrased. I would even just like make it more specific around the image. Their foot, like. Into mud. Like, something like that. Whatever. Yeah, I mean, whatever that is, I'd make it really specific, make it like something active. I mean, you can use passive voice sometimes, but you probably want to trim it down. I don't know if that's the same. As they released in the pit, the gravel was now mud. From the blood of the 30 fallen souls before them. Yeah, I would just kind of rephrase. As soon as the word was given, Tim withdrew his weapon and ducking and duck. Oh, man, that's weird. And ducking and ducking. Gosh, so much for my commas. I think it's comma and ducking, stabbed. I don't know. I would just rephrase. How many commas gets trippy. His opponent had immediately raised his sword to protect his face out of fear, leaving his stomach exposed. As he lowered his blade, blood poured from his mouth as the last moments of life left him. Trevino's first match took a little longer, but he decapitated his opponent, causing the crowd to roar in excitement. Tio Monta heard this. Tio Monta hated this. One thing is I would focus on one viewpoint character. Try not to switch viewpoints until a chapter change. Something. Even if it's something like Trevino looked over. Like, whatever. That still keeps you in Trevino's perspective, but then you, still can communicate with the other character's feeling, but then it's like, oh, Trevino. And then it kind of does double duty because it's so, like, to me, Trevino likes his competition. He's checking out his opponent, and then also you're kind of communicating how his opponent feels. Tiamonta slaughtered his next two opponents with great ease. Okay. So you're kind of stepping back in a narrative summary, which is fine. I think this is good conflict. It's like a battle to the death. Like, I kind of want to know what happens. You have two people who are contenders for number one. I think it's fine if you draw this, not like draw it out like indefinitely, but like, stay in the scene, like let them watch the battles, give it a little bit more length. I wouldn't make it too long, but like, especially around Tio Monta, like your two characters, Tio Monta and Trevino, like I think you have some room to kind of expand this out. Championship match, the gates raised as the crowds roared as Tim looked ahead to see Trevino. Tim. Who's Tim? Hmm? Only it was not him. Trevino had slipped on his last match on the battleground, and the opponent cut a lucky break. No Trevino then, no real test. No real test and no real champion. two circled. So if Trevino dies, I would have Tiomonte be like the as I just focus on the sound of the first clash swords. The two circle around each other as Tiomonte struck first with a powerful downswing, which was met with a well-timed block, but forced him to a knee from the brute force of the blow. Echo of the swing let out a wave that momentarily drowned out the sound of the jeering mob. As they held a position, their beating hearts raced faster than Tiomonte's racing mind, contemplating the new adversary and the fate of Trevino. Distracted, his opponent rolled in the blood-soaked mud and gained an attack position. I don't know the different colors, but yeah, maybe these are your edits. He swung viciously and methodically at Tiomonte, swinging left and right. He narrowly avoided the advancing attacks. He could hear the crowd. The crowd's roar grow as his dodging placed him near the wall. Try to shorten your verbs instead of like he had gone or had just said he went. That sometimes helps kind of keep the prose moving fast. But I mean, your prose moves pretty quick. It's very well written. I would just dig into the character and really figure that out. And build out the scenes. Realizing his position, he knew he must strike back. From slash the jabbed his sword in between the exposed trees, lights it up. The crowd cheers. Twisted his blade, falling face forward in the muddy arena as Tiomonte violently removed defense by the blood. Laid lifeless, Tiomonte was victorious. Crowned, you are a monster. You're a beast. It seems a bit. You are a beast seems a bit colloquial. Like it doesn't match with your tone. Yep. That was a decade ago in a place called Hyperion, the southern region of the land known for its dry mountain, lifeless climate only occupied by the most savage and skilled warriors. A culture deprived of good and evil but pure bloodlust and conquest. Revered sacrifice and chaos but loved death. I mean, part of it is I think this is kind of a cool intro. But one thing is, you did such a good job communicating this in the first chapter. You almost don't have to say it twice. I think this was. I mean, I would just trust your reader to get it. I mean, you did a great job of building that world, bringing us into it. I would even do more of just having the scenes, having the characters interact, Tiomonte and stuff like that. But then, yeah, I mean, I kind of, I mean, the big communication piece in this paragraph is that we're in the South now, and there's a big, an uninhabitable terrain between them and habitable terrain, yeah. So then that's something that I would want to have two characters in this upcoming scene hopefully discuss. Though isolated from the Dragonland, it's not stop the legends of these first warriors from spreading. These are the stories nightmares are made of. These are the stories of death. Tiomonte quickly rose in the ranks of their army and conquered the land and the surrounding tribes. He had much, but was not satisfied. Continued was cheapened by not facing. That's good. I like good to have a character with a chip on his shoulder. It's actually really good. Yeah, makes him much more real. Subconsciously, he feared he would never have been defeated him, and that Trevino, a decent warrior, would have achieved more if he had survived. The thirst for blood and hunger for power drove him to march his armies north to the mountains to start a war to end all wars. He lost many men crossing the mountains till he came to a second most southern realm, Millsteam, some mountainous region inhabited by farmers. One thing that you may want to consider is you're kind of using this like historian type tone, but you may actually want to bring in some character that's telling the story. So maybe it's like a bookend on this where like some old man like walks into a tavern and is like, let me tell you the story of Trevino. That can kind of like allow for like kind of the, or it just kind of gives some more character to the language you're using, and then you know it'll make you can kind of have some more like jokes, different types of like things, devices you can use with like the just like the exposition of like what's going on with these kingdoms. But then it also kind of keeps that in its own type of scene because it's someone telling it in a story in like a bar. I mean, one thing that you'll see more in novels now is they won't kind of have as much of like this like kind of narrative summary, which is like, hey, I went to the bar and then I got a beer. They'll have much more like scene to scene, like a movie almost, where like, you know, there'll be like someone will like turn the handle of the bar, like you're like, open up the door, like survey the crowd, walk across the creaky floor, pop out, like, ask the bartender for a drink. He says, how old are you? Like, they'll kind of go into scenes a lot more and then, kind of go in, do something, and then just hop right to the next one, almost as they would with the movie. I think this is good. I think you kind of need all this context, but I would try to find, a really either in this, like in a scene, like that two people are discussing it in these farmlands that, are at risk of being attacked by these crazy warriors, or something where we're talking about this, or it's happening, or this information's coming through in a scene with conflict and stakes and stuff like that, without, having to step back into this narrative voice. It may make it faster. It's reading pretty fast now, but it could probably maybe help. They butchered they butchered the butchers and burned the haystacks in effigy of the gods. And word arrived to King Azar, who sent his 3 sons to protect the kingdom. Jason, the youngest and quickest, was to ride south and keep a watchful yet distant eye on the advancing armies. Jacob, the middle and wisest, I like the 3 sons, yeah. And I think this is good. It feels like a fairy, which is kind of the tone you're going for. So I think that's a really wise move you made, is to introduce like 3 brothers, kind of these fairy tale archetypes, because this has the tone, kind of the pacing of a fairy tale, where there's a lot in narrative summary and you're only jumping in a few scenes. There's some really good fairy tales by like George MacDonald. There's one called The Shadows that you might like that kind of does. It's like kind of a longer fairy tale, but it's like really, really well done as far as how to balance out like the scene versus like kind of the higher level like quick narrative that's just like getting through the like those plot points too. So he found the most important task: supernatural intervention. They would not be able to ward off the impending death and destruction. He gathered 6 of his best guards, as well as Cedric, his mentor and trainer, and Francis, one of his father's advisors, who was well versed in the mystical arts and the regional history. They rode north on the horseback icy town to Winmas. From there, they were to set sail across the treacherous seas toward the Mystic Isles. I would almost, that would like, having the brothers compete for the tasks or having some sort of conflict there would help a lot. As far as like, having like a good, engine in place to say, hey, look, like they're, competing over which spot to get. And then you get 2 things over. You get conflict, you talk about the spots, and then you also get to know the brothers really well. So those are some things to think about, you know, as you kind of work on this, is to say, hey, can we take this like kind of narrative summary and turn it into a scene? And these are like kind of the things that can kind of help really make it sing. Hold on real quick. Just gonna take a second before I jump into the next chapter. Okay. All right. Let me take another look here. Well, aboard the rocking ship, Jackson's men glared out onto the sea, anxious for adventure. The full moon illuminated the glassy waters, lighting their path. The stillness of the night, the night's stillness of the night. I think this is probably a tone choice, but you almost want to always do. Was broke by passive voice. You usually want to. So you almost want to switch it, right? So whenever you're bringing in by passive voice, that means you usually have your subject and your verb backwards. So you want to say friendly jests friendly jests exchanged back and forth amongst the warriors broke the stillness of the night. Much more active. It's like something being done to, instead of the stillness of the night was broken by friendly jests back and forth among the warriors. It's kind of harder to follow that second sentence because it's easier for just your brain to follow a really direct line of thought than like an event and then the cause is discussed later. It's easier to have cause effect instead of effect. The stillness of the broken night, or the night was broken by cause blah. It's easier for your brain to follow when the cause is addressed first, then the effect and the cause and the effect and the cause and the effect. So that's why I would, unless it's really important, avoid active voice. The shallow jokes passed with time eventually. Pass with time, comma, eventually breaking the ice as they told their own unique stories to pass the time. Watch out with the time. Time is used in. So yeah, just be aware that if you have like the same word like really close to itself, and even if it's in a different context, it kind of can be jarring. Mark told his first as his personality. Firstborn of the prominent, never hearing no from his parents, he never no from the ladies as well. He was well dressed, spoken, educated, knew what to say to win hearts as easily as he broke them. Brushed his blonde hair, blue in the. So I really like this character description. One, it's like really well, like first as in his personality, firstborn and the prominent. So that's like kind of just like a good use of parallelism. But one thing to think about is it's easier for me to know this about these people if I see them do it. Like, maybe he has like a girl he has his arm around or whatever. Or maybe he we actually hear the last joke and then he like busts in, is like, I'm going to tell my story first. And then I know, I know that like this is a guy who's going to dominate the conversation, be really intense and weird. And I don't have to, it's like sort of showing, not telling. I would almost want you to show me this person in action, not just tell me he's like the first to do all these things, but like make him, actually like bring us into the scene. That's kind of a really helpful tool for doing that. So like bring us into a scene where we, see them all on the ship talking, telling jokes. We hear someone tell a joke and he's like, all right, everybody, top. I'm gonna go first and tell you who I am, and then I know all that you've told me in the first half of this paragraph. But it's actually in a scene with conflict. Maybe someone doesn't like that he's going first, and it really, then we want to know what happens. Maybe it starts a fight. We want to know who wins the fight. Bringing in uncertainty can really help make that conflict just really sing. So I would show, not tell. Can we see this character's traits in action? Cool. On the top of the tallest crow's nest was the short, bearded man named Weskin. He was the most skilled archer on land, with his advantageous short frame, allowing him to hide amongst the brushes and pick off his enemies without detection. Sniper guy. quiet and deadly. He rarely said a word. When he spoke, he muffled as if to even mask his own words. In fact, the most audible words Weskin ever spoke were obscenities. Other than that, if his small frame demanded. So that's like a really one. It's a great characterization. But two, that's another really. Those are some really cool things you can show. Like have the character just mumble and only like say the like say swear words that people like written in clear English. Those are. Would not even mutter to a woman before she was rude. It was incredible and frustrating at the same time. I would have them, talk about this. Kind of a funny trait. Yeah, snores napping. I mean, this is just, really easy to be, yeah, below deck, yeah. So you already kind of established, you're kind of showing that he's already out of the party. I would just really, commit. So, like, you're already saying, hey, he's below deck, he's not with all these people talking. I would just commit to that. Maybe someone goes and looks for him. Those types of things to get this same type of character trait exposed. Um, Also, if anybody's watching, feel free to put in comments. I will read them and make notes as well for the writer. Let me actually see. All right. Okay. Bum bum bum. Probably should just have it running on a separate computer, but oh well. Seasoned warrior, he had fallen in love with the high priestess of Lala from a different land and attempted to woo her. He joined the infantry and fought in the missionary wars under Prince John's command, but Lala appreciated the gesture. Her affection toward her was not reciprocated. Bummer, as she must remain pure in order to maintain her gift of the sight. Whatever. The devastated. Well, I don't know if sight is like a skill. It's like a proper noun, or if it's just like something general. Devastated. Dave racked up a sizable gambling debt. Was forced to leave the land, doing odd jobs to keep his creditors at bay. Um, yeah. It's good. A lot of information. I would like. I think, this is almost what you would call a story treatment, which is like a story that's like compressed, into um, like narrative summary. Like I think you could probably expand this out. Like what's your word count? 21,000. You could probably expand this out to a, 80,000 word novel without like, without breaking a sweat. Because like all these characters are really well developed. You have really good writing ability and like all the sentences are well done. Great imagery. Surprise it's really rock solid. And then you have like a great story, like these like people from the north coming down. I think the one thing you'll want to look at, and even check out some books, like the bestsellers right now, is they almost invariably use scene, like they use scene structure, like they're using kind of those same conventions that you see in film. Because what has everybody been trained to watch, or how to absorb stories is through like these scene structures. So that's something you may really want to consider. Moving a little bit further away from narrative summary, going into scenes, showing, not telling, all these traits. Like so, having these traits visible by actions and choices the characters are making. But because like even now, like I'm probably like I kind of feel that compulsion to start skimming because I'm like, okay, what's gonna happen next? Where's the next scene? So I can what I can engage myself with. And you want to be able to give that to the reader quickly. Vigilante on the deck was Asiago. Athahar was navigating the ship, so it's good information, but like you kind of need to candy coat it, and usually that's done through conflict scene, goals, stuff like that. Jason kept himself remain focused on finding these weapons to save his family. The necessity for survival nearly overwhelmed him internally. How? It weighed on his heart so heavily that it could possibly sink his vessel, yet like the glassy water remained calm on the outside. There was one stowaway per se on the ship. Was he a stowaway or wasn't he? One thing is you kind of want to avoid like almost those types of things that undermine your clothes, like you're undermining your pros. Like, yeah, there was or he wasn't a stowaway. Unless like the narrator, you want to make him like questionable or somebody we don't believe. I would just say there was one stowaway on the ship. He was a young man eager for adventure and to defend his homeland. Discovered him. Yeah, I would almost want to watch this scene. Like, so you have these people who are like embarking on this big mission to like stop these crazy barbarians that are gonna come and like wreck their world. Like, we can really dig into that, get to know all these people that are getting on board. Like, what's really awesome is they're all distinct, unique characters. They all have this great backstory. I would kind of want to actually see them in action and start like messing with each other, like it's happening down here. By the time they heard shouting from Asiago. So you jump into a scene later, but I don't see this initial part. Can I see this part of the scene too? Which is good. You want your readers to be wanting to see more. What is it? Francis inquired. Lying on the floor was a bloody mess. Bucket of red dye and thrown at the youth. I do not know. I don't know. No, usually in dialogue, you don't wanna split these types of things because it sounds like no one really talks like that. Bloodworms. What? Bloodworms. Life-sucking oversays not them that I would be concerned with. What comes next? What comes next? I don't even know what that is, but that sounds terrifying. Water demons. They look like dragons without wings, lizards without scales. So I like describing. Okay, yeah, great. I was about to say that. I was like, I like describing stuff in the negative, but you also want to have positive, like what it actually is. So you did that right here. They have poisonous tentacles that come out of their head, able to regenerate over time. Dark black creatures. The older ones glow in the moonlight. So this is great. So see, this is a perfect example of getting exposition across, like what this thing is, like, while in a scene. So now I'm actually worried, and it's making the scene have higher stakes because the exposition is adding to the drama. So there's conflict, there's blood everywhere, something's wrong, and now it's about to get worse because these things are coming in. So you've done double duty. You've made me more interested to know what happens next because there's this unresolved conflict and there's uncertainty. But then you've also snuck in some information about these exaltus. So that's something that I would want to encourage you to really use much more. Like what you're doing here is great, but do it everywhere, and this will really start picking up even more momentum than it already has. No sooner to fear when bit out of the water, it bit the stowaway as it fell back in there. His legs left standing on the starboard side of the ship. Oh, get dominated, poor stowaway. Devour the top half once. So that's good. So well, I mean, it's some crazy conflict. I mean, that's really good scene and like crazy conflict. Kind of random to introduce a stowaway and he dies immediately a second later, but it's one of the reasons you want to have like a bunch of characters, more scene. But this is cool. Like you're willing to kill one of your characters. It kind of adds some of those stakes. Launched it at the bow, and then here we are. We're seeing these characters in action. This is great. Let's see. Another was on the port side. He was maybe played. I think you really do a great job on scenes, but you really need to commit to making those scenes really pop, or just using them. I mean, they work really well when you use them. Another rose on the port side, illuminating from the full moon. Illuminated by the full moon. I would just say like the full moon reflected off his like scales or whatever. He's been with the injecting blades. Men slice the creature's abdomen. Partially digested bloodworms on spilling. Ah, nice. That's good imagery. See. The third crawled up the front and scampered up the ship's mast. The men could hear the cracking of the wood underneath the creature's weight. Adhere grabbed the helm and swayed the ship back and forth, forcing the creature to drop into the pit of nearby warriors. Avoiding the tentacles, they diced the water demon. Aethir forcibly steered the ship to an approaching island to avoid more of these treacherous creatures. Fortunately, they were met with a gale of wind that snapped Ixotl's crash math. Is that the name of the creature? Oh, that snapped the axolotl cracked mask. I would almost hyphenate here, because that's just like a kind of a weird. I would almost just use already cracked mask. Um, I mean, but it's pretty good overall. The action's really clear. I know what's going on. It doesn't always happen when you read someone's work. But yeah, I would just you know, primary goal 0 is to make it just crystal clear what's going on. You're doing a good job about that, and just continuing to find those little parts where it misses. Ship spun out of control under the influence of the wind, like a top handled by a toddler. The hull of the ship splintered, and the men knew the ship was going down. They grabbed any wood they could find, with nothing more than the armor on their bodies and the swords at their sides. They drifted to the shore as dawn approached. The chaos of the ships glowed with the first rays of light as the mast sank into the infested waters. Great scene. See, like, great imagery, great scene where I'd break up the paragraphs a little bit more. Once you get over about 4 or 5 lines, gets to a big chunk of text, you still want to separate um, some stuff. But yeah, I'd almost do that. Without their fears are put to rest, they watch the remaining ones disperse. Without eyelids, the water demons despise light, and dawn's sun rays drove the creatures away. Tired and determined, the adventurers drifted to shore. Awesome. Well, it's getting late, so I'll probably stop for tonight. But great job. Like, it worked really well. It sounded really good. Excited to see what happens next. So I can't wait to keep reading. Yeah, dude, good job, and I will try to do some more notes on this soon. Take it easy, bud, and a great job on the story.